Stop scrolling for a second. Look at your screen. You're probably on Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp right now. 3 billion people use these apps every single day. They've changed how we communicate, how we think, how we see the world. One man controls all of it. But here's what they don't tell you about Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't invent social networking. He stole it. He didn't build Facebook alone. He betrayed everyone who helped him. And the empire he created, the one that connects the world, is built on lies, lawsuits, and the largest privacy violation in human history. Mark Zuckerberg is worth over $200 billion. He's one of the richest men alive. But the price of that fortune was paid by the friends he destroyed, the partners he betrayed, and the billions of users whose data he sold. This isn't a story about innovation. It's a story about ambition so ruthless, it makes Machiavelli look like a saint. And it all started with a simple idea: make girls on campus think he was cool. Mark Elliott Zuckerberg was born on May 14, 1984, in White Plains, New York. His father, Edward, was a dentist. His mother, Karen, was a psychiatrist. They were well off, educated, successful, the kind of family that had every advantage. Mark was the only boy among 4 children. From childhood, he was different. Brilliant, but socially awkward. Obsessed with computers, but terrible with people. His parents recognized his gift early. While other kids his age were learning to ride bikes, Mark was learning to code. By age 11, he'd created ZuckNet, a primitive instant messaging program that connected all the computers in his father's dental office and their home. When patients arrived, the receptionist could send a message to Dr. Zuckerberg without yelling across the office. It was simple, but it worked. Mark had built his first social network at 11 years old. His father hired a private computer tutor, David Newman, a software developer who came to the house once a week. Newman later recalled, "It was tough to stay ahead of him. He was a prodigy. I'd teach him something, and by the next week, he'd have taken it 10 steps further." Mark attended Phillips Exeter Academy, one of America's most elite prep schools, where tuition costs more than most people's annual salary. At Exeter, Mark was surrounded by the children of senators, CEOs, and old money families. Everyone was smart. Everyone was accomplished. Everyone was special. For the first time in his life, Mark wasn't the smartest person in the room, but he refused to be ordinary. While his classmates studied Latin and played lacrosse, Mark built a music player called Synapse. It used artificial intelligence to learn users' listening habits and predict what they'd want to hear next. Technology that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade. Microsoft and AOL both tried to buy Synapse and hire Mark. He was 17 years old. He turned them both down. Money wasn't the goal yet. Recognition was. Mark wanted to build something so impressive that no one could ignore him. In 2002, Mark enrolled at Harvard University, arguably the most prestigious university in the world. He chose to study psychology and computer science, a combination that would prove devastatingly effective. He was learning how people think while simultaneously learning how to manipulate them through code. He was studying human behavior like a scientist studying lab rats. At Harvard, Mark lived in Kirkland House, a dormitory that housed some of the university's brightest students. But even at Harvard, Mark stood out, and not in a good way. He wore Adidas sandals in winter. He was obsessed with ancient Rome, particularly Julius Caesar, whom he admired for conquering the known world before age 30. He had trouble making eye contact. His classmates thought he was brilliant, but weird. And Mark had a problem. He couldn't talk to girls. On October 28, 2003, Mark went to a party. He tried to talk to a girl. She rejected him. Humiliated and drunk, Mark stumbled back to his dorm room at around 8 in the evening. What happened next would change the world. Sitting at his computer, angry and hurt, Mark started blogging. "Jessica is a bitch," he wrote. "Though the girl's real name has never been confirmed, I need to think of something to take my mind off her." Then Mark had an idea. A cruel, brilliant, viral idea. He called it Face Mash. The concept was simple. Display photos of two Harvard students side by side and ask visitors to vote on who was more attractive. It was Hot or Not meets Harvard's student directory. There was just one problem. Mark didn't have permission to use the photos, so he hacked into Harvard's residential network and downloaded images from the dormitory ID files. He broke into the database of 9 different residential houses. Mark launched Face Mash at 10:09 p.m. By midnight, the site had 450 visitors and 22,000 page views. Students were obsessed, clicking through photo after photo, judging their classmates, seeing who was ranked as most attractive. The Harvard network nearly crashed under the traffic. Female students were outraged. Their photos were being used without consent in a ranking system that reduced them to their appearance. The administration was furious. By the next morning, Harvard had shut down Face Mash and hauled Mark before the administrative board. He was charged with breaching security, violating copyrights, and violating individual privacy. He faced expulsion from Harvard. Mark issued a public apology. He claimed he'd created Face Mash as a joke, that he never meant for it to get so big, that he was sorry for any harm caused. But privately, Mark had learned something crucial. People are obsessed with comparing themselves to others. They're addicted to judgment, to ranking, to seeing where they stand in the social hierarchy. Mark had accidentally discovered the psychological mechanism that would make him one of the richest men in history. He just needed to figure out how to monetize it. While Mark was dealing with the Face Mash fallout, 3 Harvard upperclassmen were working on their own project, a social networking site for Harvard students called Harvard Connection. Cameron Winklevoss, Tyler Winklevoss, and Divya Narendra were everything Mark wasn't. The Winklevoss twins were 6'5" Olympic rowers, handsome, athletic, from a wealthy Connecticut family. Divya was a brilliant computer science student. They were popular, confident, connected. They had a great idea, but needed a programmer to bring it to life. They'd heard about the Face Mash incident. They knew Mark was brilliant with code. On November 30th, 2003, Divya Narendra sent Mark an email. "We have an idea for a website that we want to create. We'd like to discuss it with you." Mark agreed to meet. The Winklevoss twins and Divya explained their vision, an exclusive social network for Harvard students where people could create profiles, connect with friends, and share information. It would be called Harvard Connection, later renamed Connect You. They showed Mark their plans, their preliminary code, their vision for the site's architecture. They asked him to finish building it. Mark said yes. He signed a verbal agreement to work on the project. For the next 2 months, Mark strung them along. He'd send occasional emails. "I'm working on it. Making good progress. Should be ready soon." But Mark wasn't building their site. He was stealing their idea and building his own version. On January 11th, 2004, Mark registered the domain name thefacebook.com. He was secretly building a competing site using everything the Winklevoss twins had shown him. On February 4th, 2004, Mark launched the Facebook from his Harvard dorm room. The site was almost identical to what the Winklevoss twins had described, but it was his. The tagline read, "A Mark Zuckerberg production." Within 24 hours, 1,200 Harvard students had signed up. Within a month, over half of Harvard's undergraduate population had profiles. Within 2 months, the Facebook had expanded to Stanford, Columbia, and Yale. The Winklevoss twins were devastated. They'd trusted Mark with their idea, and he'd stolen it and launched it as his own. When they confronted him, Mark's response was chilling and dismissive. "If you guys were the inventors of Facebook, you'd have invented Facebook." It was the logic of a sociopath. Might makes right. The winner writes history. Theft is only theft if you get caught. But Mark didn't build Facebook alone. He had help from a friend who would pay the ultimate price for his loyalty. Eduardo Saverin was Mark's only real friend at Harvard. He was sophisticated, business-savvy, well-connected, and most importantly, he had money. Eduardo came from a wealthy Brazilian family and understood both finance and social dynamics, everything Mark lacked. When Mark needed funding to get Facebook off the ground, Eduardo didn't hesitate. He invested $15,000 of his own money, covering servers, legal fees, business registration, everything needed to keep the site running. In exchange, Mark made Eduardo co-founder and CFO, giving him 34% ownership of the company. They signed an agreement. They were partners, friends, brothers building something revolutionary together. Eduardo trusted Mark completely. That trust would be Eduardo's biggest mistake. As Facebook exploded across college campuses, adding schools every week, Mark met Sean Parker, the co-founder of Napster, who'd become a Silicon Valley legend for disrupting the music industry. Sean was everything Mark wanted to be: charismatic, confident, connected to venture capitalists and tech industry power players. Sean saw Facebook's potential immediately and wormed his way into Mark's inner circle. Sean told Mark exactly what he wanted to hear. "You don't need Eduardo. He's thinking too small. He wants to sell ads to college students. But this isn't a college project. It's a revolution. You're not building a website. You're building a new way for humans to interact. And you are going to be bigger than Google." Sean convinced Mark to move Facebook's operations to Palo Alto, California, the heart of Silicon Valley. Eduardo stayed in New York, working on advertising deals to fund the company, while Mark and Sean partied with venture capitalists in California. But in California, Mark and Sean were planning something else, something Eduardo knew nothing about. In 2004, Mark incorporated a new company in Delaware, Facebook, Inc. Eduardo thought he was signing routine paperwork to formalize their existing arrangement. The documents were dense, filled with legal jargon. Eduardo trusted Mark. He signed without reading carefully. He had no idea Mark was diluting his shares. Through a series of stock issuances that Eduardo wasn't informed about, Mark reduced Eduardo's ownership from 34% to less than 10%, then eventually to 0.03%. Eduardo was being systematically erased from the company he'd helped create, the company he'd funded with his own money. When Eduardo finally discovered what was happening, he was in shock. His best friend, the person he'd believed in when no one else did, had betrayed him. Eduardo confronted Mark. The conversation was brief and brutal. Mark's response, according to leaked instant messages that would later surface in court: "Just take the lawsuit. I'm just going to cut him out and then settle with him." No apology, no explanation, just cold calculation. Eduardo Saverin, the friend who'd believed in Mark when Facebook was just an idea, who'd funded it with his own money, who'd worked tirelessly to build the company, was betrayed and discarded like garbage. Eduardo sued. The case was settled out of court in 2009. The terms are confidential, but Eduardo's stake was restored to approximately 5%, making him a billionaire when Facebook went public. But the friendship was destroyed forever. In court documents, Eduardo's lawyer wrote, "The defendant's conduct was not merely negligent or reckless. It was intentional, malicious, and designed to deprive Eduardo of his rightful share." The Winklevoss twins also sued, claiming Mark had stolen their idea while pretending to work on their project. In 2008, they settled for $65 million in cash and Facebook stock, worth over $1 billion today. Mark had betrayed everyone who'd helped him, but he'd won. And in Silicon Valley, winning is all that matters. By 2012, Facebook had 1 billion users. Mark was worth $19 billion. He was 28 years old, younger than Julius Caesar when he conquered Gaul. Mark had achieved his dream. He was impossible to ignore. But the real cost of Facebook was just beginning to emerge. Facebook's business model is elegantly simple and deeply sinister. You are the product. Every like, every click, every message, every photo, every second you spend on the platform, Facebook tracks it all, builds a detailed psychological profile of you, and sells access to that profile to advertisers. You think Facebook is free? You're paying with your privacy, your data, your digital soul. Mark understood something most people don't. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. In 2016, a political consulting firm called Cambridge Analytica harvested the personal data of 87 million Facebook users without their consent. They used that data to build psychological profiles and target voters with personalized political propaganda during the 2016 US presidential election and the Brexit referendum. Facebook knew about the breach in 2015. They did nothing. They didn't tell users. They didn't stop Cambridge Analytica. They protected their business model instead of protecting their users. When the scandal finally broke in 2018, Mark was forced to testify before Congress. For 2 days, senators asked him basic questions about how Facebook works. Mark, wearing an ill-fitting suit and sitting on a booster cushion to appear taller, gave evasive, robotic answers. He blinked too much. He smiled at inappropriate times. He looked like an alien trying to pass as human. "Senator, we run ads," became a meme, a symbol of Mark's inability to communicate like a normal person. But nothing changed. Facebook paid a $5 billion fine, the largest penalty ever imposed by the Federal Trade Commission. But for a company worth hundreds of billions, it was pocket change. No one went to jail. Mark remained in control. Because here's the truth. Facebook is too big to fail. 3 billion people use Facebook's apps. Governments, businesses, entire economies depend on it. Mark has built something so massive, so essential, that he's essentially untouchable. He's not just a CEO. He's a digital emperor ruling over a third of humanity. Today, Mark Zuckerberg is worth over $200 billion. He controls Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Oculus. He's building the metaverse, a virtual reality world where he'll have even more control over how we interact, communicate, and live. The boy who just wanted to be noticed has become one of the most powerful people on Earth. But at what cost? Eduardo Saverin lives in Singapore, a billionaire but forever marked as the friend who was betrayed. The Winklevoss twins became Bitcoin billionaires, but they'll always be remembered as the guys who got their idea stolen. Sean Parker, the man who helped Mark betray Eduardo, was later pushed out of Facebook himself, betrayed by the betrayer. Everyone who helped Mark build his empire was eventually discarded, and the billions of users who made Facebook possible, their data has been harvested, sold, leaked, and weaponized. Their privacy has been violated. Their democracies have been manipulated. Their mental health has been damaged by algorithms designed to maximize engagement at any cost. But Mark keeps winning. He's married to Priscilla Chan, his college girlfriend. They have 3 daughters. He's pledged to give away 99% of his wealth to charity through the Mark Zuckerberg initiative. He's learning Mandarin, studying artificial intelligence, and planning humanity's digital future. The media calls him a visionary, a genius, a philanthropist. But the people who knew him best, the friends he betrayed, the partners he destroyed, the users he exploited, they know the truth. Mark Zuckerberg didn't connect the world. He conquered it. He didn't build Facebook to bring people together. He built it to win. To prove he was smarter than everyone else. To show the girl who rejected him, the classmates who ignored him, the world that dismissed him, that he mattered. And he succeeded beyond anyone's wildest imagination. But success built on betrayal is a hollow victory. Mark has everything: money, power, influence, control over billions of people's digital lives. But he's lost something essential: his humanity. The social network ends with Mark sitting alone in a conference room, refreshing his Facebook page, waiting for a girl from his past to accept his friend request. It's fiction, but it captures a deeper truth. Mark Zuckerberg connected 3 billion people, but he's more alone than ever. Subscribe if you believe success without integrity is failure, because the world needs to remember that how you win matters as much as whether you win. Like this video if you think betrayal shouldn't be rewarded with billions. The tech giants don't want you questioning their origin stories. Hit that notification bell if you refuse to let history be rewritten by the victors. Because Mark's story isn't inspirational, it's a warning. The man who connected the world did it by disconnecting from his own conscience. Mark Zuckerberg, the boy who wanted to be noticed, became impossible to ignore. But the price of that attention was everyone who trusted him, everyone who helped him, and everyone who believed in him. He won everything and lost what mattered most. The question is, would you make the same choice?